SAGES Stories.
Welcome to today's episode of SAGES Stories, the official podcast of SAGES, the Society of American Gastrointestinal and Endoscopic Surgeons. Please make sure to hit the like button and subscribe so you can stay up to date with our most recent episode. And enjoy the show.
Here we go. Welcome to episode 31 of SAGES Stories, where we shine the light on some of SAGES' most impactful leaders. I'm your co-host, Dr. Kevin El-Hayek from Cleveland, Ohio.
And I'm Dr. Jenny Shao from Ann Arbor, Michigan. We hope you enjoyed our SAGES in-person episode and that everyone had a great time at our annual meeting. I know I left the meeting really inspired and honestly kind of ready to see AI take over the world.
That's pretty hilarious. I actually had a patient today who I booked for a robotic operation who was all nervous about AI doing the operation. Took me about 10 minutes to explain that the robot isn't actually doing the operation. So I think we definitely have some work to do in educating the population that surgery itself still needs humans at the helm. So maybe that'll be something we can dive into today. But with that, I have the distinct privilege of introducing today's guest, who is none other than current SAGES president, Dr. Brent Matthews. Dr. Matthews is a professor and the current chair of surgery at Wake Forest University School of Medicine and surgeon-in-chief for Atrium Health, Carolinas Medical Center. His many other accomplishments, we'll dive into many of those today, and we cannot wait to get to know him on SAGES Stories. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Matthews.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Again, I'd like to echo thank you so much for joining us today. And also congratulations on the start of your SAGES presidency. So we always like to start the episode by letting our guests share their story from their own words. So to start off, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where did you grow up? And what were some impactful moments along your journey and surgical career so far?
Yeah, so I was born outside of Indianapolis in a small community, Danville, Indiana, which was kind of my path of being in small communities for most of my life. I grew up outside of Indianapolis in a small town, Zionsville, Indiana, which we moved from and moved to Atlanta, Georgia, and I grew up, even further outside of Atlanta in a town, Roswell, Georgia. And after a short period of time of being there, we actually moved back to Zionsville, the suburb of Indianapolis, and that's probably the most formative part of my life was spent there. My brother, my sister, I have an older brother and a younger sister, also graduated from school there. My sister still lives in that town, and my parents essentially live in the same area. So grew up with kind of a smaller community feel, which the rest of my life has kind of been in big cities and big departments and complex medical centers. And you kind of reflect back to trying to keep it personal because of the smaller community aspect of where I grew up. And so that's something I typically reflect back onto. I probably the most important day of my life was the day before medical school started. So when people say, what do you call somebody who gets accepted to medical school last? You call them MD. Well, in my life, you call him Brent Matthews. I got a phone call.
BM.
Yeah.
It's BM, right? Yeah.
I got a phone call essentially about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I just happened to be at my parents' house in Indianapolis area. I think I probably went there to either get food or do laundry. And the phone rang, and I answered the phone when I was there, and it was medical school admissions at Indiana, and asked me if I wanted to get off the wait list and start medical school. And I said yes, and they said, we'll see you tomorrow at 8 a.m. And so that I'd already planned to go to Indiana University for a year and do some additional studies, and kind of had my life mapped out for a year, at least a year period. And that's kind of been a recurring theme, I think, in my professional career is that these opportunities come up that you're not really expecting, and certainly from a timing standpoint, not expecting it, and either having the courage or not being um, uh, given it enough thought. You just kind of say, yeah, that's the right thing to do before you get weighed down about the decisions. And so went to medical school started medical school totally mentally unprepared for it, and yeah, that started a series of events of how I got into surgery, how I got into minimally invasive surgery, really my relationship with the SAGES as a society, and so yeah,
I
that
love the IU connection. I feel like we've talked about that before because I also went to IU med school. So a little shout out to Indiana
oh
there.
yeah. Yeah, actually my oldest daughter is going to graduate from Indiana University this May. So
Go
it's given me an
Hoosiers.
opportunity to get down there a few times.
I feel like we've had a little string of Indiana
Yeah, including
connections on
Sally.
Sage's story. Yeah, on Sage's story. So it's definitely drawing a nice spotlight onto that Midwest state, just a little bit close to Ohio. So we're right there. Um, but yeah, that's great. It's definitely something I didn't know about you. I think oftentimes when we see leaders, we kind of expect to hear this squeaky clean, no challenges story, but we've learned that through many episodes that there's just never that story is very rare. The sort of perfect story where you applied and got in, and can think back on a few of our previous guests about being kind of called at a point when you were maybe least expecting it and succeeding. And though this episode will drop well after the match, which was last week for many med students, for some it'll be fresh on their mind that they didn't, or we have fellowship interviews going on, and it might drop around the time that people are hearing back from fellowship interviews. And I think it's a great story to just remain persistent. So where did you learn some of those qualities to kind of continue with being persistent? And I'm sure med school wasn't the only example of that. Maybe you can share another couple examples.
Yeah, I would say philosophically, I gravitate towards structure and process and discipline and just in terms of way of thinking and acting. And uh, I look back, probably the one regret that I have is I didn't apply to the military academies. I think that would have been something would have aligned very well with just how I think, how I kind of live day to day, and just the environment of again of structure and discipline and process. That probably comes from most likely from my parents. I have no one in my family has ever been in healthcare, so that was certainly a different journey. But they were that way. I would say, especially my mother. She is somebody who didn't have a college education, became an executive of a real estate company, uh, and actually worked well into her early 70s because she enjoyed what she was doing, had a passion for it, but had a lot of discipline in terms of her professional life. And so I would say it came from that. The other is the respectfulness that you get from doing it right, or working hard, and giving it your best effort. Again, was something that my parents certainly modeled.
Yeah, I love that as well. Can you give us an example of, what your discipline looks like or what your day-to-day looks like? I feel like the very opposite of that, where maybe sometimes I feel a little undisciplined. So I'd love to get some advice from you and kind of hear what you do to kind of stay that way or to keep that regimen going.
Yeah, I don't know. I sometimes I think I do these things for my mental well-being because of this just the comfort of having a routine. I mean, I typically get up every morning, certainly during the week, somewhere between probably 4:30 and 5 in the morning. Uh, I try to exercise every single day, and again, as much as it's for my my physical health. It's really for my mental well-being. Um, I typically have some kind of regimented or purposeful recurrent thing that I do on a daily basis. So right now it's like, I'm like day 815 in Duolingo. I have a book that was given to me by a mentor of mine, which is a daily. It's almost like a daily devotional book, and it's each day it's about a saint, somebody that has done something as it relates to their religious faith. And so doing something, like that on a daily basis, it kind of brings you back and grounds you. And uh, I would say my daily routine from a professional standpoint is all over the place. I still try to be clinically active. So some weeks, my administrative or my day job, as I would call it, gets put on hold a little bit because I do clinical activities. But as my responsibilities, it relates to my leadership position within the department, the health system has expanded. Um, I pretty much every day is just serving others, and making sure that I realize why I'm here, and and keeping that in mind, to ensure that the responsibilities I have are being met as it relates to serving others.
Wow. I mean, it's great. I think of all the things that were great about that, I definitely am super impressed with 815 days of Duolingo. So what did you personally think about his death and resurrection recently, of Duo? The owl. And my kids were pretty enthralled by that story.
I'm not sure I'm familiar with that story, but I am
Oh,
familiar.
so he died. So Duo died. I don't know if you saw he had X's on his eyes for, if you were following for 815 days, you would have seen this. This was like a story that he died, and now he's like resurrected. He's a different owl, because when you probably don't know because you've been doing it every day. But so his whole thing was he would be rough on people who were lazy. They would say, "Why aren't you coming?" But since that, it would make sense that you didn't know about this because you've just been 815 straight days. But my kids, if they missed a couple days, they'd get this mean message from Duo, the owl.
Yeah, well, I do know. I can't remember if it was Saturday or Sunday night. The site went down for a while. They were doing some kind of upgrade on it. I started to get anxiety about not being able to
You got
visit it. I was like, I'm doing this for the wrong reasons now.
I feel like if
what
you had a
what
Fitbit, you were
language?
always the person that probably also hit 10,000 steps a day. You were like, I'm at 909,
That's right.
9,997. I need three more steps. But I love it. What language are you doing out of
Yeah, I
curiosity?
was curious too.
Well, I'm doing Spanish.
Okay.
I've been part of an organization for about 15 years now. It's a not-for-profit that does global surgery work that myself and two other colleagues of mine, really friends of mine, started. And the service that we do is in mostly in Central America. And as somebody who wasn't fluent in Spanish, and there's a communication gap, I can get by with understanding much of the medical part of it because we do really focused work in a certain disease, and you do that over and over again. But you really can't communicate with not just the patients, but the community of healthcare providers there that help support the work that you do. And so I've made a commitment that that's I need to be more engaged in a part of the what we do. And so that's why I started doing Spanish. Hard part is I just don't get to practice it enough to be conversational. I'm getting to the point where I can certainly read, and I can understand when others are talking, but still have a hard time, talking myself.
Yeah, that definitely would be challenging. I feel like I also speak Mandarin Chinese and I'm trying to teach my son Mandarin, and I realize how hard it is to speak in a language where you feel like you don't always speak it every day. And when I see my son or my husband, I don't necessarily automatically think to speak in Mandarin. So that's definitely something I'm working on as well. But I love that you brought up this nonprofit organization that you're involved in. Is this the Surgical Outreach for the Americas? I'd love to kind of hear a little bit more about it, the organization, and perhaps its mission.
Yeah, that's the group, Surgical Outreach for the Americas. So when I was a surgeon at Washington University in St. Louis, I was like a lot of the surgeons in the department there, had a translational science lab. We also had an educational, our lab provided a lot of the hands-on education for minimally invasive surgery for the residency program, and we did some offerings for surgeons who are out in practice. And Peggy Frisella, who is a SAGES member, she's on the Go Global committee, and was the lab manager for the lab that I participated in there. And I don't know, we were sitting in the lab one day. Couldn't even recall what activity we were doing, and just talking about life. And she did mission work in Guatemala when she finished college. I had done some global surgery work in Haiti, and so we were just talking about this. And she's she's a doer. She gets things done. Is very driven, and quite honestly pushed me a lot. Pushed me a lot as well. I would say probably within 8 months of having that conversation, we had formed a group, raised money, and we were supposed to go to Mexico. We had arranged something in Mexico, and that was shut down. The State Department wouldn't let travel occur in that area due to safety. We pivoted, and about 4 months later, went to the Dominican Republic through an organization called ILAC. It's sponsored by Creighton University out of Omaha, Nebraska. And once we did that the very first time, we haven't stopped. So 15 years later, we've done 26 global surgery trips: Honduras, El Salvador, Belize is the most recent place we've been to. We've still been going to the Dominican Republic. I bet we've probably raised about $1.2 million to support this. We have an army of people who are support our mission work. Some never go on trips; they just support with our logistics, getting equipment, inventory. We have fundraisers, and it's been really interesting to see how all these people who come together over a shared purpose. And obviously this is something outside really my professional career, although my professional ability and know-how has helped lead to that. And right now we're kind of struggling with the decision about more longitudinal investment in that. So can we really actually set up a global surgery program, which we're exploring in Belize. So to hire a surgeon who's there, and we help support that surgeon when the surgeon isn't there for 3 or 4 months a year, using our residency program here where I'm at in North Carolina to help support that. And I think we have the funding figured out. That's really the biggest barrier. It's not the want and people that have the skills and talents to do it, people that want to be dedicated to doing that as part of their professional career. And we've built a relationship with the government there, as we have in a couple other countries with health ministry. So that's my big project right now, is trying to push that forward.
That's great, and I often get that question when I share some of my work in Africa, sort of how I got linked with Africa, and part of it is my background in French. My parents spoke; it was my first language, so I kind of gravitated toward someone who was in one of the French African countries, and I've just sort of stayed on that continent for a lot of my work. And the other reason I didn't sort of navigate toward the Americas was because I didn't speak Spanish, and so it was interesting that that you and I also knew that there was work going on, and it is interesting to hear that despite being in a different part of the world, there's a lot of very similar challenges regarding infrastructure and longitudinal training. And I love the way that you've integrated, and I know it's a challenge, but you've integrated the residency, because I think that the next generation of surgeons really has a different mindset about the global footprint, our global footprint, and our global responsibility. That it's a much smaller community than we often think it is. And so I love that you've integrated the residency program. I always tell my people, if I had a nickel for every resident that said, how can I do missions? How can I get and do overseas, global surgical work? I'd be quite wealthy and maybe could help fund you as well. So what have been some of the maybe the lessons you've learned about that specific question about, surrounding infrastructure and education, longitudinal, input rather than just going in? And I think a lot of people can go in and maybe do something minimal, but how do you make it impactful over a longer period of time?
Yeah, I'd say a couple things. One is I would say our not-for-profit is a logistics group that does global surgery work. Uh, so about 90% of all the work that we do is logistics, and that's something I didn't appreciate getting into this, and that was if you're going to do this well, you have to spend all your time up front. When you get there to deliver care and partner, that's actually the really easy part. So whether it's inventory, shipping, all the regulatory things you have to go through, assembling the appropriate team, so that you have all the same safety that you would have when you're at home delivering care. It kind of goes on and on, fundraising and so forth. So that was one thing that I did not realize getting into this, and actually that's kind of the challenge and to me a fun part of it. The other is that these are partnerships. Each time we go someplace, I would say we do an assessment of that, and what gaps do they have that we can help fill so that when we're not there, they don't have those gaps. And a lot of that is um, uh, uh, capital expenditures that they need, OR beds, anesthesia machine, OR lights. I mean, this last time we were down, they had swinging doors that swung back so quickly somebody's going to get hurt. So we just replaced all the doors in the facility that you're there. I mean, some of it are small things. So part of that sterilization is a real issue in a lot of these places. So I don't know how many sterilizers we've purchased, electrocautery machines, because there's a lot of other groups that will participate in care in many of these regions or in the facilities that we've been at who need a lot of the same things that we need when we're there. And each time we're trying to make it as modern as it can be. I think from the other part is we have a requirement everywhere we go that we have some safety nets. So we partner with a surgeon or a residency program in the area that we're at. So like Santiago, Dominican Republic, there's a residency program at the public hospital. In El Salvador, it's Zacamil is the hospital that has residency programs. So we have surgeons that give us cover if there's any issues with any patients, and thankfully that's a pretty infrequent event. But when we're there, we also provide education. So we have residents who will come and scrub with us. We've actually gone to the public hospitals and operated with the surgeons and the residents. We've done longitudinal curricular activities when we're not there. One of the GLAP programs that was launched in El Salvador was a result of our relationship and helping to get that going and help fund some of the activities there. Because they are setting up a fellowship program, believe it or not, an MIS fellowship program. And having operated with three of their fellows, they are actually very talented. It was it
That's
was so
awesome.
it was so
That's really
refreshing.
cool.
That's
Yeah, I thought it was gonna
cool.
be, they set up some cases, and I thought it'd be like Stump the Professor, and they bring these really hard cases to do, and that was the first year, and quite honestly, some of those cases were pretty difficult. And then I went back the next year and told them, hey, let me operate with your fellows, and they were very skilled and talented. It's a 4-year fellowship or a 3-year fellowship program after doing general surgery, so they're very well trained, very high volume, but the faculty there are really good. Uh, we do symposiums. We did one in Dominican Republic this past January. We had over 50 surgeons there. It was a hernia symposium. We did live surgery laparoscopically for the first time there, and we broadcast that. We take on all the expense of doing those kind of things. And really, I think our next thing is what I talked about is having physical presence all year round. And that's really about the recruitment and retention of talent in that facility, just because, like many low middle income countries, people leave the country to go get trained and they don't come back. And it's a real gap. And we see it as an opportunity to build partnership structure, having recruitment and retaining talent within the facility. So to me, that's kind of the ultimate goal, and you hope you get to the point where you're not needed anymore.
I'm honestly so impressed. I feel like you talking about this seems like a full-time job already in of itself. So I'm actually so impressed that this is just something that, you're a part of, but it's not your full-time thing. But before we move on, you mentioned something earlier that I kind of just like to point out and go back to for just a minute. And it was kind of about this mental health, resilience, and wellness and the things that you sort of do for yourself. I think that's such an important topic nowadays because there's just increasing rates of surgeon burnout. And I think this is something that we're really just kind of starting to talk about as a surgical community. So I'd love to kind of hear a little bit more about your strategies, how you think about this, and potentially how surgeons can combat this.
Yeah, I can just from my own lived experience as being a chair of a department, getting yearly surveys back from our faculty and our advanced care practitioners, our residents, and seeing how this has evolved over really almost a 10-year period I've been in this position. Yeah, I think we're in it's difficult a time right now as it certainly as I've ever been in a leadership being in a leadership role, and we suffer from the same things that everybody else suffers from: feeling disconnected, feeling burnout. Do I really get passion and purpose from what I do? Really fundamental questions that often I think get dismissed, but they're very important. And that is, how can we make people feel valued? Well, it can't be transactional. It has to be more than that. Yeah, for the journey we're on personally, and it's been very enlightening. Is we knew we were probably no different than everybody else around the country. Did a climate survey. Wasn't asked to do this. We knew it. We wanted some validation of what our thoughts were. When you get 52 pages of comments back from, I don't know, 100 surgeons and APPs, it can be pretty raw. But yeah, it's their perspectives. And we're doing something very similar they have at the University of Michigan. We call it the Carolinas Commitment. We're unveiling this here in about 2 or 3 months. But again, it's like that longitudinal pledge or commitment to make people feel that they're in an environment that they trust, they want to be engaged to, that they will be fulfilled, they will reach whatever their professional or academic potential is. To me, it's an accountability about how we invest in others and how we need to be accountable for their success, not the other way where they're really being assertive and trying to be successful, and we throw things out at them. And this has been about almost a 4-year process. We did the climate survey right after COVID. Maybe that wasn't the best time to do it, but and to me, this has been one of the biggest lessons I've learned in leadership, and that is, sometimes you just got to hear the facts, and it doesn't mean that we're bad people or we're not doing well, but people want to be heard and want to play a part in the solutions and success, and it can't be rushed, and so. To me, that's probably the most important thing, is to hear the voice of the stakeholder, and then put structure and resources and support in place so that we try to alter the sense that people have of their again passion for what they do, their purpose for serving, patients, their desire to be something different professionally and be challenged. So I kind of had to learn that the hard way by getting a lot of feedback that was very uncomfortable for our leadership team. But I'm sure a lot of other organizations are going through this inside outside surgery, inside outside medicine.
Yeah, it sounds like the Michigan Promise, right? But yeah, I totally agree. I think just being in that inclusive environment where you feel like people really care about you and value you as a surgeon and sort of you're not just a cog in a wheel can really make a big difference.
It was fairly clear, even just from these past few minutes, how impactful your leadership style has been, and you've mentioned some of the philosophy behind that in terms of being a servant leader. I'm sure that's a big part of the success. But what about some advice for some of our podcast listeners who are also interested in developing as a surgical leader? And as you know, we'll have kind of an offshoot podcast in the future um, called leading up, and sort of how do we develop into surgical leaders. You have a you have a great example, and your story is great, and you have a lot of success in leadership roles.
Yeah, so I never imagined that I would be sitting in the positions that I'm sitting in today, as I was, a surgery resident in a community-based program. Thought I wanted to do more community-based or even kind of a rural general surgery. Uh, and probably one of the most pivotal things that happened in my life was when I got recruited to go to WashU in St. Louis. I think I was probably the 10th person that, at the time that I left, about the 10th person who had left to become a department chair in the time period I was there, which is about 11-year period. And it's interesting how you can be in an environment, you go in as one thing and you leave as something very different. And sometimes it's not intentional on yourself. It's the people that you work with and what you're exposed to. And I think being in a mentored environment like that was just so instrumental or transformational in my journey as a not only a surgeon. I thought I would go there to be a surgeon scientist, but something else very different happened, and that's at a very early age, given roles and responsibilities to be a section chief, build programs, and having the cover of somebody who would help me work through situations I've never been exposed to before, having the support both administratively and from a physician leadership standpoint. Um, but even then, when I got recruited to become a chair of surgery, I was very happy with what I was doing. Never thought I'd leave St. Louis. And that opportunity came. And then I took that opportunity. It took me about 2 years to get comfortable with the fact that I was not a clinician primarily. I wasn't a scientist primarily. When I came here, my boss didn't care whether I did one case or wrote any grants. All they wanted was run a department, serve others, and be a good leader. Um, and it was a very different skill set and certainly mindset. And it also taught me that being a leader is something that you have to. There's a lot of professional development that continues in that. You just aren't appointed a leader and you know all the answers. You really, this journey continues, and so I've had to dive in, and I do this all the essentially almost on a daily basis. I'm doing something to try to update myself as it relates to my leadership acumen. Much of that is learned outside of healthcare, and no different than if you're a scientist or you're a clinician, where you're constantly evolving and learning more and doing QIPI. It's very similar on the leadership side.
Yeah, I think what you're describing sounds like a just kind of that growth mindset, right? And going into things and being open to new ideas. And I definitely feel like that probably explains why you've been so successful. So to pivot a little bit, we also wanted to ask that as the current SAGES president, if there's anything particular you wanted to focus on during your presidency this year, and if there are any new initiatives that SAGES is working on right now that you'd love to highlight.
Yeah, I can think of three things. Probably the most transformational that will occur within the society is how do we organize a structure around what I would call digital surgery. So within the organization right now, we have lots of tremendous work happening in AI. We have a lot of tremendous work happening in robotic assisted surgery, same thing in surgery data science. You could also lump in telesurgery, telepresence. This really all comes under, I think, the heading of digital surgery. And we can do a lot of great work and probably make a significant impact as it relates to activities in those separate areas. But those areas are really interrelated. AI and data science are very, very integrated with each other. Robotic surgery is very integrated with, telesurgery or telepresence and so forth. So we're going to do a structural reset on that, so that my hope is it positions us for the future of using digital surgery as kind of the overarching area. I had a meeting last week with Sally Matthews, obviously known to this podcast, our executive director. And it was funny when I told her I was thinking about that. I said all I had to do was put in digital surgery, and of course, SAGES had already written a white paper on that. It was published in 2024. I don't know, maybe you all were involved in that, but that really outlines all this. And I was like, well, we've already thought about this, and we've lumped this together. We really need to live this out. The other part of this is SAGES really, what's the responsibility of SAGES as it relates to digital surgery? Is it around the innovation? Is it to partner with others who are innovating so that we evaluate, test, find use cases in the clinical environments or research environments of that technology? Because the technology is developing so quickly. So that's one. The other is really around global, and this is truly more personal, probably more personal than it is as a what's best for SAGES. But I think this is good for SAGES. And how can we, as a community within SAGES, support global surgery efforts? I can't reveal anything yet because I haven't gotten this to the finish line. But I think there are ways for our SME groups. So if you look at colorectal or foregut or bariatrics, a flexible endoscopy, to be a community that can actually support some things with global surgery as long as we have a telepresence and a longitudinal way to communicate. So communicate on an educational curriculum, communicate as it relates to QI/PI on a technical standpoint. So started working with a third party on this, but I think that this is something that SAGES is very well positioned for, just because of the critical mass and expertise that we have within SAGES, but also because I think SAGES' presence globally in low middle income countries is something that is very important to us. The third is really around the theme of the presidency. I guess every year there's a theme, like lead up with Dr. Schlachta last year, which was phenomenal as an example. And I'm taking something that's out of our health system, and that's called a connect to purpose. To me, it gets back to what we talked about earlier, and that is, how can we connect people back to the mission of the organization, an all volunteer organization, to make them engage in the activities of SAGES. And most of the time that you do that by connecting back to a story of your experience that you had in the organization that drives you or continues to get you to engage in the activities, to volunteer, hundreds of hours for some a year in activities of SAGES. And so I'm going to spend the time when we meet as an exec. So we meet, I think Sally told me 12 times this year. We're going to spend the very first part of the meeting having connect to purpose stories. And I will tell the first story here in about 2 weeks of, my connection to SAGES, which I'm happy to tell the story here tonight. But I want this to be something that the organization as a society shares, because we have a lot of people doing tremendous work for the society, and I'm not sure others understand their story. And when you understand their story, you build a community around, a shared purpose.
Well, you're absolutely preaching to the choir on the stories aspect, given that was really the impetus of this podcast, was to really dive in and hear people's stories, and really what makes them tick is more than just they're a rising leader, they're a former leader. It's why, it's their why. And those are three fantastic snapshots of what this year will be. And I love kind of the dichotomy of sort of the most advanced AI driven medicine, and then the low and middle income bridge. And I live in that space, and I love that. I love the being able to kind of be in both of those worlds, and really trying to link them, because I think they're closer than we make them out to be. I do know that there are some patients who listen, maybe a few. I know a few of mine do for sure. And I think one of the things I would ask, and maybe they might be interested, is how would you respond to the patient of today who's truly worried about AI and its integration, not only into medicine, but into the rest of what's going on. I mean, the patient today was, I'm very old fashioned, and I'm just nervous about this robot. And how would you respond to the patient from the patient side?
Yeah, my first thought is when Pat Silla was president, one of the things that she introduced to the organization was really around patient engagement. How do we hear the voice of the patient throughout the society, and engaging patients into SAGES in ways where, when appropriate, we can actually get their input or feedback into things. So I think we need to continue to understand what the patient's perceptions are, and what they understand aspects of care delivery to be, especially with this new technology. I could completely understand why a patient would be concerned that an autonomous robot is going to do their surgery, and the surgical team is going to be somewhere remote while they do that, and we hope it's programmed appropriately for what they need to do. So, my hope is, through part of this digital surgery initiative, is that we can demystify some of the concerns that, whether it's a patient, I'm sure we even have healthcare providers that are concerned about things like AI or autonomous surgery, or and there's a lot of ethical questions to wrestle with. There's a lot of issues to address as it relates to regulatory compliance. And so, to me, this is one of the reasons why we need another structure, because things are going to change rapidly, and we have to be nimble enough to be able to respond to this. And right now, our structure doesn't allow us to do that. But I'll get back to, I think we need to continue to either get the voice or of the patient directly, or certainly make that a priority as it relates to when we start thinking about initiatives. When somebody taught me a long time ago, there's two questions you always need to ask as a leader. One of them is, who's not going to like this when you get ready to do something? And often that's the patient may not like it. And then the next question is, and then what? So thinking about the second, third, fourth level consequences, of a decision. And often the first level consequences are really about the people that are providing care. The second, third level are really about the patient, the family. And so we have to be intentional in that.
Yeah, it was so funny. So I was listening to something recently where they talked about I, Robot by Isaac Asimov, which is, like a very old book that was written so long ago. And I think it still addresses some of like the most relevant questions that we're still asking today about how do we integrate robotics and AI and it feels like the technology has come so far, but some of the same questions we're kind of still grappling with. So I'm really excited to see what Sages is going to do on that front. So we're going to pivot a little bit again, and ask you about ERCAD. So we also learned that you're one of the co-creators of ERCAD North America, which is Institute for Research into Cancer of the Digestive System, which is a partnership with ERCAD France and Strasbourg. So we wanted to learn a little bit more about the collaboration and the organization and what it does.
Yeah, I'm a person that rarely says no when somebody comes to me with an idea.
That's shocking.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
shocking. If you read your CV, you would know that you're a yes man. There's
yeah.
definitely you're a yes man.
And 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 the reason I do that often is, I want people to have an opportunity to present, whatever their ideas are, because whether that idea is actually plausible or not, there may be a component of that that is actually something that is, that is important or certainly needs to be heard. So Dionysus Verhides, who is a transplant surgeon in our Department of Surgery, who has a colleague who's involved in ERCAD in Strasbourg, had a conversation. That conversation was really about why is ERCAD not in North America? And our relationship with that was we were the first hospital in the United States that was certified by ERAS Society. And so there were some conversations about how could you integrate enhanced recovery into some of the curriculum. I think at ERCAD, that's kind of how the conversation started. And Dionysus thought about that for a little while and then came to me and said, I have this idea. And the idea is to bring ERCAD to the United States at the time. And I thought it was such a crazy idea, although knowing ERCAD and its place in the world of surgery, especially disrupted technology or I said, well, let's talk about this a little bit. I didn't dismiss it. Uh, and about 2 years later, after having a lot of internal conversations, putting some structure together, trying to model what this would look like, how the decision process would be, what would the investment be, a couple trips to France, having their leadership come here and meet with our health system. Just some unusually timed things that happen in our health system. We acquired Wake Forest Baptist Health, a medical school was a part of that. So Julie Freischlag, Dr. Freischlag became a supporter behind this. She saw the value of this. We got a new chief innovations and strategy officer who came from the University of Pittsburgh who said, I want to start an innovation district. I need a magnet within the innovation district. So he was wildly supportive. A change in my personal leadership, a change in the chief physician executive, and the new chief physician executive said, run with this. I'm supportive. Let me know what infrastructure you need to help, work through this. So all these kind of things came together simultaneously, and we modeled this out, and it got to a point. It was one of the first times in my life I really got to a point where I said, I don't know what the next step is. I'm like so far out of bounds of anything that I understand. I can't take this any farther. Um, and so we got support to do that, and we pitched this to our CEO as we're building a medical school here in Charlotte, an innovation district that will have startups and actually large med tech companies will be here to help co-develop and innovate with our health system. Got support behind this and essentially said we had to raise $75 million to make this a go. So then I spent 2 years partnering with others trying to raise the money to do it. And we ended up raising the capital to do this. We got exclusivity for North America, so there will not be an ERCAD in Canada or anywhere else in the United States. And it will open the second weekend of September 2025.
Wow. I was going to have the timeline question. So, and when you say open, it's I'm sure there'll be additional programs and institutes within it, but what will the opening entail in September?
Yeah, so the opening activity is an advanced laparoscopy course of bariatrics, colorectal, and foregut. Jacques Marceau will be here. Professor Marceau will be here to lead the course. We'll have international faculty, as they typically have for ERCAD offerings throughout the other ERCADs worldwide. There'll be many faculty within our department who will be a part of that, and the course will be for all the chief residents in our health system.
Wow.
And a few fellows. I think we have 42 chief residents across the entire health system. So it'll be a 5-day course, and then the course concludes on Friday afternoon, and then opening ceremonies will be Friday and Saturday.
That's amazing.
Congratulations.
What
Yeah.
an awesome opportunity as a trainee. I'm sure if there's any trainees listening to this, they're going to come to Atrium Health Carolina.
Yeah, if there's some med students that are looking for some interesting surgical training programs, you have one that now is integrating fairly consistently, looks like global surgery, digital surgery, and now an innovative center that crosses multiple countries and cultures in the legacy of ERCAD. So it is a hotbed for surgical education and training.
Yeah, I get almost weekly, I have somebody who reaches out to me wondering if we have a job opening within the department because of ERCAD. They want to be within ERCAD.
Wow.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure how much they're attracted to the department versus ERCAD, but yeah, I think it will be a magnet for our department and
Oh,
to
yeah.
grow the innovation that we do.
So
Well, we
I do want to hold you to your Sages Connection offering that you said. Now this will probably come out after you share it with execs, so they'll probably have already heard it. But if you're still willing, we'd love to hear that story.
Yeah, so I tell people that SAGES was probably the most transformational, if you want to say, entity or person in my surgical career. So I went to a community-based program, thought I was going to be a community general surgeon, potentially a rural-based general surgeon. I was a chief resident in October, November of my chief year. And Bruce Shermer, who's a past president of SAGES, Dr. Shermer came and gave grand rounds on laparoscopic colectomy. And at the time, we were just doing laparoscopic appendectomies, inguinal hernias, cholecystectomy. I think that was pretty much it. Was really just kind of floored at what he presented and what was being done. And for me, I said, saw a gap in what my training was at the time, and how am I going to get through that learning curve or that hurdle? You could tell this was the future of surgery. And then the next month, Nat Soper from WashU came and gave grand rounds on laparoscopic foregut surgery. And I was like, wow, this is getting even more. I'm in a worse situation than I thought. Look at all this stuff, happening, and I'm going to have to learn this in some way. So when Dr. Soper spent time with the residents, I actually asked him the question. I said, how does somebody train in all this advanced laparoscopy? And he said, I will give you some contact information. There's some fellowship programs in the country, not that many, but let me give you some contact to SAGES. And so this is like 11 o'clock in the morning. He gives me the information. It's a phone number to Sally Matthews, and Sally was working with Barbara Bursey at the time. And I called Sally, introduced myself. Obviously, we had the same last name. We both went to Indiana, so we hit it off. Sally faxed me a list of 8 programs that had fellowships. There's no fellowship council at the time. So I did not have email. I did not have a cell phone. I mean, this is like, send me the fax. I'd wait for the fax to get there. I called all the programs that Friday afternoon. One of the programs, Pat Reardon, who was just starting a program at Baylor College of Medicine at the time, said to me, if you can be here on Monday, I'll interview you. And so I got on a plane on Sunday, went down to Houston, interviewed for the fellowship position. He offered me the job. So I actually turned down the job that I'd been offered as a chief resident. So trained with Pat, learned a lot of foregut and thoracoscopic surgery, and some other things, but clearly could still see that I had a gap. Didn't do colon surgery, solid organ, not a lot of hernia. So I did the same thing I did the time before. I called Sally Matthews and said, hey, can you fax me the list again? So she faxed me the list again. The list, I think, had 15 programs now. So I went through the same process and called around and got an interview, actually where I'm at right now, Carolinas Medical Center. They were starting a fellowship with Todd Henneford, who was actually who trained at the Cleveland Clinic with Michel Gagne. So he may have been one of the first people that was actually fellowship trained that went out and started training fellows. So I came here, did that, and so I would have done a third fellowship if I could have, if I would have found one that would round out even more of what I wanted to do. So, so Sally and SAGES got me connected to those two things, but the story continues, and the story is about 3 years into practice, I got a phone call from Steve Strasberg. I think everybody knows Dr. Strasberg. I certainly knew who Dr. Strasberg was, and he called me and said, would you be interested in coming to interview for a section chief job at WashU in St. Louis? And I thought it was a prank, quite honestly. So I went and interviewed for that position, and two things happened. One is I was recommended for that position by Dr. Jeff Ponsky, who's somebody you know very, very well. So I met Jeff through SAGES and won a Young Investigator Award. And Jeff was very supportive of me as a junior surgeon. He was, I think he may have participated in the training of Dr. Henneford, but certainly knew Dr. Henneford. So he was very supportive. So he's the one who recommended me to Tim Eberline, who was the chair there. And Tim's criteria was, what I was told was, he wanted somebody that was trained in minimally invasive surgery, somebody that was certainly on the slope going up of their career, who could, start a section of minimally invasive surgery, because there weren't many there. And when I went there to interview for that position, I was taking the position of Nat Soper, who happened to be there, and Nat, kind of helped guided me into the department, and so there was all these like SAGES connections, and I would never have had that understanding. I certainly wouldn't have had those connections had it not been, for SAGES. And then of course I went there, became a section chief, and really that was a time period in my career of significant professional growth and support, mentoring. But yeah, I look back to it, and it's really based on that one phone call, or Nat Soper saying, "Hey, SAGES, call Sally Matthews," and everything was moved forward from there.
Wow, some amazing sponsors and mentors and greats of minimally invasive surgery in that story right there. And yeah, and I think that's just a testament to, saying yes and not really knowing what opportunities are going to come your way. And so I think with that, it's the perfect segue to one of Kevin and mine, like, favorite segments of the show, which is the We Are the Sages segment. And
We are the world. We are the world. We are the sages. We are the sages. Sing it, everybody. We are the ones who make your brighter days so good time tonight. There's a choice we make. We got a lot more coming. We are dancing.
So for this question, we really want to hear about your most memorable SAGES moment.
Yeah, in 2000, well, it had to have been 2003, because when I was awarded the Young Investigators Award, and to me it was really kind of like this validation of, wow, you're on the right path. Some amazing things have happened, and you owe a lot to the people around you who have, as you said, sponsored or mentored you. It was also validation of the work and effort that you put in. But yeah, I'll never forget my wife. That your spouse was invited. My wife was 7.5 months pregnant with our first child. She wanted to come out, so my mom came with her to support her, to me it was like, yeah, I think I'm doing the right things here. It was really the first time professionally I was ever recognized in that way. And you kind of understand the gravity of that, and again, I'm very thankful for that, and one of the reasons I continue to give as much as I can to SAGES 22 years later.
Wow. An amazing story, Brent. And I love how much I get to learn, how much Jenny gets to learn, and then subsequently all of our listeners about the SAGES leaders in such a short time. And I know I speak for Jenny when I say we're humbled to be in front of these kind of questions and answers that get borne out. And for that, I just want to thank you for your time. I want to thank your family for them letting you spend this hour with us. I know that it's always tough when it's later in the evening, and but it was an honor to have you join us and share your journey with us. And I think we're leaving. Both of us are leaving this podcast session more inspired, and I think our listeners will feel the same way. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the time. I mean, it's really hard to describe the honor that you feel representing the society and the role that I have. And when the transition was occurring over the weekend of as Dr. Schlachta's presidency was winding down, things were winding up. It is something that is very unique, and I really look forward to this year and hope that I can serve the society like so many great people have before me.
Thank you again so much.
Thanks, Brent.
Thanks. That's a wrap.
And that wraps up today's episode of SAGES Stories. You can view the show notes for any links to sites we referenced today. Visit sages.org for membership information and for the most recent news from our society. Follow us on Twitter at @sages_updates. Make sure you hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. See you again next time, and remember, you can't spell minimally invasive surgery without SAGES.